The twin moons of Kepler 442b cast silver light across the endless fields of green crops. Commander Nara crouched behind a rock formation, her dark armor making her invisible against the night sky. Her four arms moved with practiced silence as she checked her weapons one final time. The plasma rifle hung secure across her back. Two energy blades rested in their sheaths. Her scanning device beeped softly, showing heat signatures from the human settlement ahead. This was supposed to be simple. Get in, gather intelligence about human military strength, and get out. The Vithrek Empire had been planning this invasion for 3 standard years. Nara had studied every available report about human combat capabilities. She knew their weapon types, their battle tactics, and their defensive systems. What she did not know was why this particular colony seemed so different from the others. Her scanning device showed no military installations, no weapon factories, no defensive barriers, just fields of strange plants and a few scattered buildings that looked more like farms than military bases. The largest heat signature came from a single structure near the center of the settlement. According to her intel, this was where the human commander should be located. Nara moved forward through the crops, her natural camouflage ability shifting her skin color to match the green stalks around her. Each step was calculated and silent. She had earned the nickname Silent Death by completing 47 missions without ever being detected. Tonight would be number 48. The crops were taller than expected. Some reached above her 7-foot frame, creating perfect cover as she approached the main building. But something felt wrong. These plants did not look like any food crops in her database. The leaves were too thick, the stalks too strong, and the smell was unlike anything from any known agricultural world. As she got closer to the building, warm yellow light spilled from its windows. Nara pressed herself against the outer wall and listened. Inside, she could hear someone moving around. The sounds were not what she expected from a military commander preparing for war. Instead, she heard what sounded like cooking. Metal pans clinked together. Water bubbled and steamed. Something sizzled over heat. The smells coming from the building made her stomach growl unexpectedly. In all her years as a warrior, she had never encountered anything like this during a reconnaissance mission. Nara activated her visual enhancement and peered through a window. What she saw made her pause in confusion. A single human male stood in what was clearly a kitchen. He wore simple civilian clothes, not military uniform. His black hair was slightly messy, as if he had been working outside all day. He moved around the kitchen with calm efficiency, stirring something in a large pot while checking on several other dishes cooking at the same time. The man looked nothing like the hardened military leaders in her briefings. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with a peaceful expression on his face. When he smiled at something he was cooking, Nara noticed he had the kind of genuine warmth that her instructors had warned her never to trust in enemy species. Her scanning device identified him as human male, age 31, no visible weapons, no military gear, no backup forces nearby. The readings made no sense. According to Vithrek intelligence, this settlement housed at least 50 human soldiers and their commanding officer. Where were the others? Nara moved around the building, checking every window and door. The structure was larger than it looked from outside, but it seemed to be designed for comfort rather than defense. Through another window, she saw a living area with soft furniture and books scattered on tables. A third window showed what appeared to be a workshop filled with farming tools and plant samples. No weapons storage, no communication arrays, no strategic planning rooms. Just the peaceful home of someone who seemed more interested in growing things than fighting wars. The confusion made her careless. As she moved to check the rear of the building, her foot caught on an irrigation pipe, hidden in the darkness. The pipe broke with a sharp crack, sending water spraying in all directions. Nara rolled behind a storage shed, cursing silently in 3 different languages. Inside the building, the sounds of cooking stopped. Nara held her breath and waited. In her experience, humans typically responded to unexpected noises with either aggressive investigation or calls for backup. She prepared for both possibilities, her hand moving to her energy blade. Instead, she heard the front door open gently. Footsteps approached her hiding spot, but they were slow and cautious rather than hostile. A voice called out in accented galactic standard. "Hello? Is someone there? Are you hurt?" The concern in the voice surprised her. No military commander should sound worried about an intruder. This had to be some kind of trap. "I heard something break out here. The irrigation system can be dangerous in the dark. Please, if you are injured, I can help." Nara remained silent, trying to understand what kind of psychological warfare this could be. Humans were supposed to be aggressive and suspicious. They were not supposed to offer aid to unknown contacts. The footsteps came closer. A bright light suddenly illuminated the area around her hiding spot. Nara pressed herself deeper into the shadows, but she knew it was only a matter of time before she was discovered. "I know you are there," the voice said gently. "I can see the broken pipe. You must have hit it pretty hard. Those things are strong enough to support farm equipment." The light moved closer. Nara made a quick decision. If she was going to be discovered anyway, she might as well control the situation. She stepped out from behind the shed with her hands, visible but ready to reach her weapons if necessary. The human male stood about 10 feet away, holding a simple electric lantern. When the light fell on her, his eyes widened with surprise, but he did not reach for a weapon or call for help. Instead, he looked concerned. "Oh," he said quietly. "You are not human." "No," Nara replied carefully. "I am not." They stared at each other for a long moment. The human seemed to be studying her appearance, taking in her height, her 4 arms, and her obvious military gear. But instead of fear or aggression, his expression showed something Nara had never encountered during first contact with any species. Curiosity, mixed with genuine concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked again. "You hit that pipe pretty hard, and you seem to be favoring your left side." Nara looked down and realized he was right. The impact had bruised her ribs, and she was unconsciously protecting the injury. How had this civilian human noticed something that most military observers would miss? "I am fine," she said, though the words came out less convincing than she intended. The human smiled slightly. "I am Jiwan," he said, "and you look like you could use some food and a place to rest." Nara stared at the human who called himself Jiwan. Every instinct told her to grab her weapon and complete the mission through force. She had been trained to eliminate witnesses and extract information through any means necessary. But something about this situation felt completely wrong for all the tactics she knew. Jiwan stood there holding his simple light, waiting patiently for her response. He had not called for backup. He had not drawn a weapon. He just looked at her with those strange human eyes that seemed more worried about her injury than afraid of her presence. "You are bleeding," Jiwan said, pointing to her left arm. Nara looked down and saw dark liquid seeping through a tear in her armor. She had not noticed the wound during her infiltration. The broken irrigation pipe must have had sharper edges than she realized. "It is nothing," she said, but even as she spoke, she felt dizzy. "Nothing?" Jiwan stepped closer, and Nara automatically reached for her energy blade. He stopped immediately, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Sorry. I did not mean to startle you. But that looks like more than nothing to me." Thunder rumbled overhead. Nara looked up to see dark clouds gathering across the sky. Her weather scanner had predicted clear conditions for the next 6 hours. Apparently, the local weather patterns were more unpredictable than her intelligence reports had suggested. "There is a storm coming," Jiwan said, following her gaze. "A big one, from the look of those clouds. You should come inside." I should leave, Nara replied, though she was not sure where she would go. Her extraction point was 50 kilometers away through rough terrain. In her current condition, with a storm approaching, she might not make it. Leave to go where? Jiwon asked. The nearest settlement is 3 days on foot. You are injured and bleeding, and that storm is going to be here in less than an hour. As, if to prove his point, the first drops of rain began to fall. Within seconds, the light shower became a steady downpour. Please, Jiwon said, having to raise his voice over the sound of rain hitting the ground. I am not asking you to trust me. I am just asking you not to die of blood loss in my field. It would be bad for the crops. The last comment was so unexpected that Nara almost smiled. Almost. Instead, she studied this strange human who seemed more concerned about farming than the fact that an armed alien warrior was standing in his yard. The rain got heavier. Her wound was bleeding faster now that the water was washing away the natural clotting. Jiwon was right about one thing. She would not make it to the extraction point in this condition. 1 hour, she said finally, until the storm passes. Good, Jiwon replied, as if her agreement was the most natural thing in the world. Come on, let me get that arm looked at. He turned and walked toward his building, apparently trusting that she would follow. Nara hesitated. This could still be a trap. The friendly behavior could be a way to get her inside where other humans were waiting, but her scanning device showed no other life signs, and her training had taught her to recognize deception. Jiwon seemed genuinely concerned, not calculating. She followed him inside. The interior of the building was even more confusing than the exterior. Warm air surrounded her immediately, carrying scents she could not identify. The main room was clearly designed for living, not fighting. Soft chairs were arranged around a low table covered with books and papers. Plants grew in containers near. The windows. Everything was clean and comfortable in a way that Vithrak military facilities never were. Sit anywhere, Jiwon said, gesturing toward the chairs. I need to get some supplies to clean that cut. He disappeared into another room, leaving Nara alone. She could have searched the building now, looking for hidden weapons or communication devices. Instead, she found herself drawn to the books on the table. Most were written in human languages she could not read, but a few were in Galactic Standard, and their titles surprised her. Sustainable Agriculture in Low-Gravity Environments. Cross-Species. Nutritional Requirements. Soil Composition Analysis for Colony Worlds. These were not military manuals. They were farming guides. Jiwon returned carrying a small box filled with medical supplies. Sorry that took so long. I had to find the good bandages. He sat down in a chair across from her and opened the box. May I look at your arm? Nara extended her injured arm cautiously. Jiwon examined the wound with gentle fingers, his touch surprisingly careful for someone with such large hands. This is deeper than I thought, he said. You are lucky it missed. The major blood vessels, but it needs to be cleaned properly or it might get infected. Vithrak do not get infections easily, Nara said. Maybe not, but alien bacteria work differently than the ones you evolved with. Better safe than sorry. He began cleaning the wound with a solution that stung but felt somehow soothing at the same time. What is your name? I am Commander Nara of the Vithrak. Imperial Fleet, she said automatically, then immediately regretted giving him so much information. Nara, Jiwon repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. That is a pretty name. I am Jiwon Park. I run this farm. You are the settlement commander? Jiwon laughed, a sound that was warmer than Nara expected. Commander? No, nothing like that. I am just a farmer. There is no commander here. But the intelligence reports said. Intelligence reports? Jiwon paused in his bandaging. You mean, you are some kind of spy? Nara realized she had said too much, but looking at Jiwon's curious expression, she found it hard to believe he posed any real threat. I am gathering information about human activities in this sector. Well, that is easy enough, Jiwan said, continuing to wrap her arm. We grow food. That is about it. Mostly earth crops adapted for local conditions, plus some experiments with native plants to see if they are edible. Where are the others? Others? The other humans. My scans indicated a settlement of 50 individuals. Jiwan was quiet for a moment. There were others, he said finally. My partner Minho went back to Earth 6 months ago. The rest of the colonists left over the past 2 years. Turns out farming on alien worlds is harder than most people thought. So you are alone? Just me and the crops. Jiwan finished the bandage and sat back. There. That should hold until it heals. Nara looked at the neat, professional bandaging job. You have medical training? A little. You have to know first aid when you live this far from civilization. He started putting his supplies back in the box. So, if you are a spy, I suppose you need to report that this place is not very threatening. Thunder crashed outside. Much. Closer now. The storm had arrived in full force. Rain hammered against the windows, and the wind howled around the building. I do not think you are going anywhere tonight, Jiwan said. Are you hungry? The question caught Nara completely off guard. Hungry? I was making dinner when you arrived. There is plenty for 2. He smiled. Even if one of those 2 is significantly larger than I expected. Nara's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. She had been surviving on military rations for 3 days, and the smells coming from his kitchen were unlike anything she had ever experienced. I do not require much food, she said. That is good, because I have no idea what Vithrak eat. But I figure most carbon-based life forms can. Handle basic proteins and vegetables. Jiwan stood up. Come on, dinner is probably ready. Nara followed Jiwan into his kitchen, her 4 arms ready to defend herself if needed. But what she found there made her stop and stare in amazement. The kitchen was filled with wonderful smells that made her mouth water. Steam rose from several pots on a cooking surface. Vegetables in bright colors were arranged on cutting boards. Some looked familiar from her galactic food database, but others were completely unknown to her. I hope you like spicy food, Jiwan said, stirring something in the largest pot. I was making bulgogi tonight. It is a dish from my home country on Earth. Bulgogi? Nara repeated the strange word carefully. Marinated meat with vegetables. I use local animals here, but the recipe is very old. Jiwan tasted the sauce with a small spoon and nodded with satisfaction. The trick is in the marinade: soy sauce, garlic, ginger, and a few secret ingredients. Nara watched as he moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. His movements were efficient but relaxed, like someone who enjoyed what he was doing. This was completely different from the military food preparation she was used to. Vithrak meals were designed for nutrition and speed, nothing more. How do you know it will be safe for me to eat? She asked. Jiwan paused and looked thoughtful. Good question. I studied xenobiology before I became a farmer. Most humanoid species can process similar proteins and carbohydrates, but if you are worried, we can start with something simple. He opened a container and pulled out what looked like small white grains. Rice, he explained. Very basic. Almost every species can digest it without problems. While the rice cooked, Jiwan showed her other dishes he had prepared. There were fermented vegetables that he called kimchi, which had a sharp, tangy smell that somehow made her hungry. There was soup made from vegetables and bones that had been cooking slowly all day, and there were small pancakes made from ground roots that smelled like the earth after rain. Why do you make so much food for just yourself? Nara asked. Jiwan was quiet for a moment. Habit, I guess. I used to cook for Minho and the other colonists. Old habits are hard to break. He smiled sadly. Also, cooking helps me think, and it makes this place feel more like home. You miss your home planet? Sometimes. But Earth is very crowded now. Too many people, not enough farmland. Here I can grow things that might help feed both worlds." He gestured toward the window, where his fields stretched into the distance. "These crops produce twice as much food per plant as Earth varieties. If we can perfect the techniques, we could solve hunger problems on dozens of worlds." Nara found this idea strange. In her experience, species fought over resources. They did not share techniques to create more resources for everyone. "Your people would give this knowledge to other species?" she asked. "Of course. Food is not a weapon. It is a basic need." Jiwon began serving the bulgogi onto 2 plates. "Besides, the galaxy is a big place. There is room for everyone to eat well." The smell of the cooked meat made Nara's stomach growl loudly again. Jiwon laughed and handed her a plate. "Try a small bite first," he suggested. "Make sure it agrees with your digestion." Nara took a careful bite of the bulgogi. The flavors exploded in her mouth, sweet and salty and spicy all at once, with textures she had never experienced before. The meat was tender and rich. The vegetables added freshness and crunch. It was unlike anything she had ever tasted. "This is..." She struggled to find words. "This is incredible." Jiwon's face lit up with pleasure. "You like it?" "It is the best food I have ever eaten." Nara took another bite, then another. "How do you make flavors like this?" "Practice and good ingredients." Jiwon served himself and sat down across from her. "The marinade takes 2 days to work properly. The vegetables have to be picked at exactly the right time, and the cooking temperature has to be perfect." As they ate, Jiwon explained more about human cooking. He told her about spices that came from earth plants, about fermentation processes that created complex flavors, and about cooking methods that had been passed down through thousands of years of human history. "Food is culture," he said. "When you eat someone's cooking, you taste their memories, their family traditions, their homeland." This bulgogi recipe came from my grandmother, who learned it from her grandmother. Nara found herself telling him about Vithrak food, though there was not much to say. Military rations were designed for efficiency. Nutrient paste provided everything. A warrior needed to survive, but there was no pleasure in eating it. "You have never had food made with love?" Jiwon asked. "Love?" Nara did not understand how that emotion could be related to food preparation. "When you cook for someone you care about, you put love into the food. You choose the best ingredients. You take extra time to make it perfect. You hope they will be happy when they taste it." Jiwon refilled her plate without asking. "Love makes everything taste better." This concept was completely foreign to Nara. Vithrak warriors were taught that emotional attachments made them weak. Food was fuel, nothing more. But as she ate Jiwon's cooking, she began to understand what he meant. There was something in this meal that went beyond nutrition. It made her feel warm and satisfied in a way that had nothing to do with filling her stomach. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked suddenly. Jiwon looked surprised. "Why would I not be kind to you? I am an armed stranger who broke into your property. In most species, that would result in violence or at least suspicion. You were hurt and caught in a storm. Those things are more important than where you came from or why you are here." Jiwon took a sip of tea he had brewed from local plants. "Besides, you seem more curious than dangerous." "I am very dangerous," Nara said seriously. "Maybe. But right, now you are also my dinner guest, and guests deserve hospitality." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Rain hammered the roof and wind shook the windows. But inside the kitchen, everything felt safe and warm. "Tell me about these crops you are growing," Nara said eventually. Jiwon's enthusiasm was immediate and obvious. He began describing his experiments with hybrid plants, his soil improvement techniques, and his plans for expanding food production. As he talked, Nara realized that this human was not just a farmer. He was a visionary who dreamed of feeding the galaxy. For the first time since arriving on this planet, she began to understand that her mission might be more complicated than she had thought. 3 days had passed since the storm, but Nara found herself staying longer at Jiwon's farm. She told herself it was because she needed more time to gather intelligence. The truth was more complicated. Each morning, she watched Jiwon tend to his crops with the same care that Vithrak warriors showed their weapons. He checked each plant individually, testing soil moisture, examining leaves for signs of disease, and making notes in a thick journal that he carried everywhere. "These are protein root vegetables," Jiwon explained as they walked through one of his fields. "They grow underground like potatoes, but they contain complete amino acid profiles. One plant can feed a family for a week." Nara knelt down to examine the plants more closely. The leaves were thick and waxy, designed to hold moisture in dry conditions. "How long do they take to grow?" 4 months from seed to harvest. But they store well and can grow in almost any soil type. Jiwon pulled up a sample root to show her. It was larger than her fist and had a pleasant, nutty smell. "I have been working on varieties that can handle different atmospheric conditions too." "Why?" Nara asked. "Why spend so much effort on feeding people you will never meet?" Jiwon was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather lived through a famine when I was young. I remember how thin he got, how worried my grandmother was. He used to say that no one should ever be hungry if it could be prevented." He touched one of the plant leaves gently. "These crops could prevent a lot of hunger." As they continued walking, Nara found herself sharing information she had never intended to reveal. "My homeworld has been struggling with food shortages for 20 years, she said. "The soil is becoming too acidic to grow traditional crops." "Acidic soil?" Jiwon stopped walking and turned to look at her with interest. "What is the pH level?" Without thinking, Nara provided the exact measurements from her planetary database. Only after she had spoken did she realize she was giving potentially strategic information to someone who might be an enemy. But Jiwon did not seem interested in military applications. Instead, he pulled out his journal and began making notes. "There are treatments for acidic soil," he said excitedly. "Lime applications, specific bacteria cultures, crop rotation with nitrogen-fixing plants. It takes time, but soil can be restored. The Empire believes conquest is faster than restoration," Nara said. "Conquest gives you someone else's resources, but restoration gives you resources that last forever." Jiwon showed her a section of his field where the soil was obviously different in color. "This area was completely barren when I arrived. Now, look at it. The soil was rich and dark, supporting healthy crops that stretched toward the horizon." Nara had to admit it was impressive. "How long did this take?" 3 years of constant work, but now it will support crops for generations." Jiwon knelt down and grabbed a handful of the soil. "Want to know the secret?" Despite herself, Nara found that she genuinely wanted to know. "Patience," Jiwon said, "and understanding that everything is connected. The soil, the plants, the water, the air, even the insects. You cannot just take from the system. You have to give back to it." That afternoon, Jiwon showed her his greenhouse laboratory. Inside the climate-controlled building, he was growing experimental crops designed for dozens of different planetary conditions. "Low-oxygen atmosphere plants here," he said, pointing to one section. "High radiation resistance varieties over there. And these ones can grow in almost pure sand." Nara walked through the greenhouse in amazement. Each section was carefully labeled with growing conditions, nutritional data, and compatibility notes for different species' dietary requirements. "You have information about Vithrak nutritional needs," she observed, stopping at one display. "I tried to research all the major galactic species. Food should work for everyone." Jiwan joined her at the display. Though I admit I do not have much data on Vithrak biology, most of your people are not very interested in sharing information with outsiders. We are taught that sharing information makes us vulnerable. Maybe, or maybe it makes everyone stronger. Jiwan picked up a small plant from the Vithrak-compatible section. I developed this strain based on what little I could find in galactic databases. It should provide the mineral supplements that Vithrak physiology requires. Nara took the plant and examined it carefully. The leaves had the blue-green tinge that indicated high levels of the metals that Vithrak needed in their diet. On her homeworld, these minerals had to be extracted from increasingly rare ore deposits. This plant could solve our mineral deficiency problems, she said without thinking. Then you should take some seeds back with you, Jiwan replied simply. Nara stared at him. You would give away your research, just like that? It is not my research if it helps people. Besides, I would love to know how well it grows in actual Vithrak soil conditions. Consider it a scientific exchange. That evening, as they shared another of Jiwan's incredible meals, Nara found herself talking about her homeworld in ways she had never spoken to anyone before. She told him about the cities that were slowly being abandoned as the soil failed. She described the children who went to bed hungry because food shipments from other worlds were too expensive. She even mentioned the growing desperation that had led to the Empire's expansion policies. Conquest seemed like the only solution, she said. Take resources from worlds that had plenty to give to worlds that had nothing. But what happens when you run out of worlds to conquer? Jiwan asked gently. Nara had no answer for that. The Empire's long-term planning did not extend beyond the next series of invasions. There is another way, Jiwan continued. Instead of taking from others, we could all work together to create more. Share knowledge, share techniques, share resources, help everyone build sustainable systems instead of fighting over limited ones. You make it sound simple. The ideas are simple. Getting people to cooperate instead of fighting, that is the hard part. Jiwan refilled her teacup. But it starts with individuals. One person helping another, one shared meal, one exchange of knowledge. Later that night, as Nara lay in the comfortable guest room that Jiwan had prepared for her, she stared at the ceiling and thought about everything she had learned. Her original mission had been to gather intelligence about human military capabilities. Instead, she had discovered something far more dangerous to the Empire's plans. Hope, Jiwan had shown her that there were alternatives to endless conquest, that cooperation could be more powerful than domination, that sharing knowledge could create abundance instead of scarcity. Her communication device beeped softly, indicating an incoming message from her superiors. They would want a progress report soon. She would have to decide what to tell them, and, more importantly, she would have to decide whether she was still willing to be part of an invasion that would destroy everything Jiwan was trying to build. Nara woke to the sound of her communication device beeping urgently. The display showed an encrypted message from Admiral Kesh, her direct superior in the Vithrak Imperial Command. Her blood went cold as she read the priority level. Maximum urgency. Immediate response required. She dressed quickly and stepped outside into the early morning air. Jiwan was already working in his fields, but she needed privacy for this conversation. She activated the communication device and waited for the connection to establish. Admiral Kesh's fierce face appeared on the small screen. Even through the static of long-distance space communication, his anger was obvious. Commander Nara, you are 4 days overdue for your intelligence report. Explain. Weather conditions delayed my mission, sir. I have been gathering comprehensive data. Comprehensive data should not take this long. The invasion fleet will reach human space in 6 days. We need strategic information immediately. Kesh's 4 eyes narrowed with suspicion. What have you discovered about human military installations on Kepler 442b? Nara hesitated. She had rehearsed this conversation in her mind dozens of times, but now that the moment was here, the words felt impossible to say. "The situation is more complex than our initial intelligence suggested, sir." "Explain, quickly." "There are no military installations on this world, no weapons caches, no defensive systems. The settlement consists of a single agricultural research facility operated by one human civilian." "Impossible. Our scans indicated at least 50 human combatants." "The scans were incorrect, sir, or perhaps outdated. Most of the colonists have returned to Earth. Only the farmer remains." Admiral Kesh was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. "You are telling me that you have spent over a week observing one human farmer?" I'm telling you that this world poses no military threat to the Empire, sir. The resources here are agricultural, not strategic." "All resources are strategic, Commander. Food production facilities will be valuable assets once we control this sector." Kesh leaned closer to his communication screen. "I want a complete report on their agricultural capabilities. Production numbers, storage facilities, distribution networks. Everything. Sir, I believe there may be alternatives to invasion that would better serve the Empire's needs." The silence that followed was so long that Nara wondered if the communication link had failed. When Kesh finally spoke, his voice was filled with barely controlled rage. "Did you just suggest that I consider alternatives to direct military action? The agricultural techniques developed here could solve our food shortage problems permanently. The human has expressed willingness to share his research. Cooperation could provide more resources than conquest." "Commander Nara, you have been infected with human sentiment. This is a serious breach of military discipline." Kesh's image flickered as he adjusted something off-screen. "You will provide the requested intelligence data within 12 hours, or you will be classified as compromised and subject to immediate termination." The communication link went dead, leaving Nara staring at a blank screen. She had expected anger, but the threat of termination meant her situation was worse than she had imagined. If she failed to provide the intelligence data, the Empire would send assassins. If she did provide it, the invasion would proceed as planned, and everything G1 had built would be destroyed. She walked back toward the farmhouse, her mind racing through possible solutions. None of them seemed good. G1 was in his kitchen, preparing breakfast as he did every morning. The familiar smells of cooking food and fresh tea filled the air. When he saw her expression, he immediately set down his cooking utensils. "Bad news. From home?" he asked gently. Nara looked at this human who had shown her nothing but kindness and hospitality, who had shared his food, his knowledge, and his dreams of feeding the galaxy, who trusted her enough to offer her seeds that could save her homeworld. "G1," she said carefully, "what would you do if you had to choose between loyalty to your people and doing what you believed was right?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking about her question seriously. "I think loyalty to your people should mean doing what is best for them in the long run, not just what they want in the short run." He poured tea into 2 cups and handed her one. "Sometimes the right choice is the hardest choice, even if it meant being considered a traitor. History is full of people who were called traitors by their own generation, but heroes by the next." Ji-won sat down across from her. "What choice are you facing?" Nara took a deep breath and made her decision. "My people are planning to invade this sector. They sent me here to gather intelligence about human defenses, but what I found instead was something that could help both our species." To her surprise, Ji-won did not seem shocked by this revelation. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I wondered if that was why you were really here. Armed reconnaissance scouts do not usually show up alone unless they are gathering intelligence for something bigger." He sipped his tea calmly. "How long do we have?" 6 days before the invasion fleet arrives. Maybe less. "And what do your superiors want from you?" "Complete intelligence on your agricultural capabilities." Production numbers, storage locations, distribution networks. Information they can use to take control of your research. Jiwon was quiet for several minutes. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful rather than afraid. What if we gave them something better than intelligence? What if we gave them a solution? What do you mean? Your people need food. My research can provide food, but invasion will destroy the research facilities and kill the knowledge. Cooperation would preserve both. Jiwon leaned forward. What if your intelligence report showed them a better path? They want conquest, not cooperation. Then we show them that cooperation is more profitable than conquest. Jiwon stood up and began pacing around the kitchen. Help me understand your people's situation. What exactly do they need? Despite every rule of military security she had ever learned, Nara found herself providing detailed information about Vithrak resource shortages, agricultural failures, and population pressures. As she spoke, Jiwon made notes and asked technical questions that showed he was understanding not just the problems, but possible solutions. Okay, he said finally. I have an idea, but it is going to require both of us to take some very big risks. What kind of risks? I am going to help you write an intelligence report that will change your people's minds about this invasion, but if it fails, we will both probably be considered traitors by our respective species. Nara thought about her alternatives. Submit the standard intelligence report and watch Jiwon's work be destroyed. Refuse to submit any report and be terminated as a compromised agent, or take a chance on this human's crazy plan. What exactly are you proposing? Jiwon smiled, and for the first time since she had known him, the expression looked almost predatory. We are going to offer them something they want more than conquest. We are going to offer them survival. Nara and Jiwon worked through the night to prepare the most important intelligence report in Vithrak military history. But instead of weapon locations and defensive capabilities, this report contained something far more valuable: a complete solution to the Empire's resource crisis. Jiwon had documented everything: soil restoration techniques that could rehabilitate dying Vithrak agricultural worlds, crop varieties specifically designed for Vithrak nutritional requirements and atmospheric conditions, advanced irrigation systems that could work with minimal water resources. Most importantly, detailed production schedules showing how much food could be generated and how quickly. The key is showing them the numbers, Jiwon explained as he added another section to their report. Military minds understand logistics. Show them that cooperation produces 10 times more resources than conquest, and they will listen. You are assuming they think logically about resources, Nara replied. The Empire's expansion has become about power and pride as much as survival. Then we give them a way to have power and pride through leadership instead of domination. Jiwon pulled up a new document on his computer. What if the Vithrak Empire became known as the species that solved galactic hunger? That would be a legacy, worth more than 100 conquered worlds. The final report was 30 pages of detailed agricultural data, resource projections, and cooperation frameworks. It included genetic samples, soil analysis charts, and step-by-step implementation guides. Most importantly, it included a formal proposal for a Vithrak human agricultural exchange program that would benefit both species. Are you sure about this? Nara asked as she prepared to transmit the report. Once I send this, there is no going back. If they reject the proposal, you will become a target for invasion anyway. I am sure, Jiwon said. This is bigger than just my farm or even this planet. This could change how species interact throughout the galaxy. Nara activated her communication system and sent the report directly to Admiral Kesh with maximum priority: encryption. Then they waited. The response came faster than expected. Within 2 hours, Nara's communication device was buzzing with an incoming message. This time, it was not just Admiral Kesh on the screen. Behind him, she could see other high-ranking officers and what appeared to be civilian officials. Commander Nara, Kesh began, his voice carefully controlled. We have reviewed your report. These agricultural projections, are they accurate? Yes, sir. I have observed the production capabilities personally. The human has been documenting his research for 3 years. The food production numbers you cite would eliminate our resource shortages within 2 growing seasons? Yes, sir. Possibly less, depending on how quickly the techniques can be implemented. An older Vithrak that Nara did not recognize leaned into view of the communication screen. From his elaborate uniform, she guessed he was someone very high in the Imperial hierarchy. Commander, this is General Voss. I want to speak directly with the human who developed these techniques. Nara looked at Jiwon, who nodded and moved into view of the communication screen. I am Jiwon Park, he said calmly. I understand you have some questions about agricultural cooperation. Human Jiwon, General Voss said formally. Your report suggests that you are willing to share advanced agricultural techniques with the Vithrak Empire. What do you want in return? Nothing that you cannot easily provide, General. Scientific exchange, peaceful trade relationships, and a commitment to using these techniques to feed people rather than support military expansion. You would trust us to keep such an agreement? Jiwon smiled. Trust is built through actions, not promises. I propose that we start with a small exchange program. A few Vithrak agricultural specialists come here to learn the techniques. I send some of my best seeds and equipment to one of your agricultural worlds. We see how well it works before expanding the program. General Voss was quiet for several minutes, apparently consulting with advisors off-screen. When he returned his attention to the communication, his expression was thoughtful. Human Jiwon, your proposal is being seriously considered by the Imperial Council. But I must ask, why are you offering this cooperation? Our species have never had peaceful contact before. Because hunger is not a Vithrak problem or a human problem. It is a galactic problem that requires all of us working together to solve. Jiwon gestured toward his fields, visible through the window behind him. I have enough food here to feed thousands of people. But I have techniques that could feed millions. Which one is more valuable? And if we accept this proposal, what becomes of our current military plans? That is your decision to make, General. But I can tell you that destroying agricultural research to steal 1 year's worth of crops is much less profitable than preserving that research to grow centuries' worth of crops. The communication ended with promises to contact them again within 24 hours. Nara and Jiwon spent the waiting time preparing for every possible outcome. They organized seed samples and technical documentation. They prepared contingency plans in case the Empire rejected the proposal. Most importantly, they prepared themselves for the possibility that they had just changed the course of galactic history. The response, when it came, was not what either of them expected. General Voss appeared on screen again, but this time his expression was almost relieved. Commander Nara, Human Jiwon, the Imperial Council has voted to accept the agricultural cooperation proposal. Our invasion fleet has been redirected to defensive positions, while we implement a new long-term strategy based on resource development rather than resource acquisition. Nara felt her legs go weak with relief. Furthermore, General Voss continued, Commander Nara, you are being reassigned to serve as the Empire's liaison to the new agricultural exchange program. Your understanding of both species will be valuable in building this partnership. And the invasion? Jiwon asked. Cancelled indefinitely. The Council has decided that cooperation is indeed more profitable than conquest, exactly as your report demonstrated. 6 months later, Nara stood in the same fields where she had first encountered Jiwon. But everything was different now. The farm had expanded to include research facilities staffed by both human and Vithrak scientists. Ships regularly arrived, carrying soil samples from Vithrak agricultural worlds and departed with seeds and equipment. More importantly, the first reports from Vithrak worlds using Jiwon's techniques were showing incredible success. Crop yields were up by 300%. Soil restoration was proceeding ahead of schedule. For the first time in decades, Vithrak children were not going to bed hungry. The council wants to expand the program to include 12 more species, Nara told Jiwon as they walked through the newest experimental fields. Apparently, news of our success is spreading throughout the galaxy. Good, Jiwon replied. That was always the plan. Was it? Even when you first invited me in from that storm, you were planning to change galactic politics? Jiwon laughed. No. When I invited you in from that storm, I was planning to keep you from bleeding to death in my field. Everything else just grew from there. They stopped at a section where new crops were being tested for compatibility with Zentaurian atmospheric conditions. The plants were thriving, their leaves a healthy blue-green that indicated successful adaptation. Do you ever regret it? Nara asked. Your quiet life as a farmer got much more complicated. I never wanted a quiet life, Jiwon replied. I wanted a meaningful life. There is a difference. As the sun set over fields that now fed dozens of worlds, Nara reflected on how much had changed since that stormy night when she arrived as a spy. She had come looking for intelligence about human weapons and instead discovered humanity's greatest strength, the willingness to share abundance instead of hoarding scarcity. The galaxy's deadliest warrior had indeed been transformed by dinner. But more than that, dinner had transformed the galaxy itself, and it all started with one human who believed that food, prepared with love and shared freely, could be more powerful than any weapon ever forged.